We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness. With God on our side, we're marching strong, looking out for hurting children all around, and helping good parents carry on. Standing united, we'll overcome. We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness.
And welcome to another panel discussion presented by Family Fest 2020. This week is Children's Week, and as we discuss our children, we want to know, how do we train our children in this modern age? With so many technological advancements and a rapidly changing understanding of the requirements of being a citizen in this modern society, what are the life skills that are needed? This evening, we're discussing the 21st century life skills for youth. With me this evening are Mr. David Eversley, Mrs. Celeste Bradshaw, and Mrs. Carrie-Ann Hurley. Welcome, folks. I'm just going to introduce each of them and ask them to say a quick overview of what they expect to be discussing this evening and what you should listen for as you continue with this video. So Mr. David Eversley is a teacher and internship coordinator at the St. George Secondary School for the past 15 years. Prior to that, he was a full-time psychotherapist at Network Services and in the US, where he was trained in the area of marriage and family therapy. At present, he also assists with counseling needs at the school. One of his life goals has always been to help others to be the best they can be, whether they be clients in psychotherapy or students at school. With the latter, his additional goal is to help students build a secure foundation to be able to adequately navigate life in adulthood. Sounds like the perfect person to ask, what do you see when you think of the 21st century life skills for our youth?
Well, when I think of the 21st century, I just think bombardment. Uh, a lot of what I think societies were accustomed to before, or the passing on of norms and values, and a lot of reflection, a lot of insight from elders. However, in the 21st century, there is just a massive bombardment of information of every type. And our children are the ones who are most exposed, I think, because they're the ones who are most open to all the social media exposure. So it's almost a battle of having to be able to fight against some of the effects of the information that's out there that might not be too helpful or beneficial or healthy to our youngsters.
All right. That's very interesting. We're going to dig into that a little more in just a moment. Mrs. Celeste Bradshaw holds a Bachelor of Science in Social Work, Masters of Social Work with Management and Administration from the University of the West Indies. She's married with two sons, 27 and 17 years old. She enlisted in the Royal Barbados Police Force in 1987 and worked in various departments, including the Juvenile Liaison Scheme, where she was a sergeant in charge before being seconded to the Government Industrial School in 2009. Her current post at the GIS is Welfare Officer, and she has acted in the post of Deputy Principal of the Government Information School annually since 2009. Mrs. Celeste Bradshaw, welcome. And what do you see as our focus when we talk about the 21st century life skills of our youth?
Thank you for having me, Graham. When I think of the 21st century and life skills, I think about how the landscape across the world is changing. We're witnessing the development and the emergence of the technological age. Many of us who were born in the 60s, we have challenges with even a simple remote control. But for our children, technology will become part and parcel of their everyday lives. Computer literacy is becoming more and more vital in our lives since even what we learn in this year or so, within another few years will become obsolete. So I see a need for our young people to keep ahead of the times if they're to go into the workplace and to fit in. I think they need to keep abreast of the changing times and especially so with the technology. I also see a need for soft skills as well as the hard skills, but soft skills such as communication, emotional intelligence. Our children, while the majority of them may pursue the hard skills as we know it, I still see a lack of those soft skills which should go hand in hand with the hard ones to make them rounded and competent for the workplace. Where I sit as the social worker now at the government industrial school, we see children on both ends of the spectrum. You have those who they cannot really grasp the basic academics, far less the complexities of the technology. And then we have those on the other hand who are able to understand the technology to a point, but I find that we need to do more so that there's a mesh between the softer skills and the hard skills so that we produce well-rounded individuals for the workplace.
Wow, that's quite a nugget and a lot to think about as we get into it. Lastly, but definitely not leastly, we have Mrs. Carrie Ann Sirra Hurley. She's a multi-talented and artistic singer, songwriter, fashionista, social worker, youth advocate, mental health and wellness and etiquette consultant with a deeply rooted love for music, all things fashion, empowering young people, and butterflies. That's the sad thing. We can't discuss butterflies this evening. However, Carrie Ann, we're going to ask you to let us know, what do you think we need to be focused on as far as the 21st century life skills for youth?
Well, good evening, Graham, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Thank you so much for having me be a part of this discussion tonight. I really agree with what both David and Celeste have shared so far. And so I wouldn't go over the points that they raised, but I would definitely just note that when I think of 21st century life skills for youth, I'm thinking about critical skills that are needed to help them cope with and thrive in a rapidly changing world. A world that, as both my colleagues mentioned before, technology is coming at us quick, fast. We have those of us who are older, we are struggling to keep up, whereas it seems as if the youth are coming out of the womb knowing how to automatically use a lot of the technological devices and even the software, just knowing how to navigate a lot of the social media platforms without even being taught by someone else. It's almost like they already know. And so I think in as much as we acknowledge that this is something that is real, that we have to be on top of these developments and these advancements, it's still important that we do not disregard, like Celeste was talking about, what we consider the soft skills, which I think are the foundational skills that we need for life in general. They will serve us well in our personal lives, as well as our professional lives. So the same skills that we cultivate in terms of social graces, communication, problem solving, all of these can be transitioned and transported into our professional lives as we have to employ them day to day in our jobs as well, right? The same skills of learning about emotional intelligence and critical thinking and how to be resilient, especially when I reflect on the fact that we're in COVID-19 right now. And so we've had to learn how to transition really quickly to online platforms such as this to have these type of conversations, because we can't be face to face like we would have, you know, pre-COVID-19. And just even this transition can be very traumatic for some people because of the learning curve that comes with it. And sometimes it feels like, well, we're stuck, but there needs to be an element of resilience, us remembering and realizing that as human beings, we are created by God, and in Him we can do all things, and that therefore means that there's resilience already built into our DNA. Like, we can overcome any challenge that comes our way. So when we're dealing with young people, and especially in my work, I always try to emphasize their ability to overcome, their ability to not necessarily be overwhelmed completely by what they're facing, but understand that they can actually shape their destiny, and they can be the ones to set that path that they need to take. And they're persons who are here to help guide them, to help provide mentorship and support, to help them figure out what that path is and how they need to walk it.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much, Carrie Ann. Now, let's get right into it. Interestingly enough, I noted that all of you spoke about, and especially Celeste, spoke about being in the position of seeing children who have issues with both sets of skills. And I think I should start with a disclaimer that if you're watching this, what we're about to talk about is work. It's going to take work. It's going to take effort. It's going to take repetition and expectation and building standards and setting the bar high for your children. Okay, so if you don't want to do that, this is not for you. It's going to take work. Let's start with technology. And interestingly enough, we had some challenges with technology as we were preparing for this presentation. However, we overcame them, as Carrie Ann said. Let's talk about that adaptability, that ability to take something on and move forward with it, something that is brand new. One of the things that I keep hearing, I've heard from my parents as they watch their grandchildren, is how quickly they're adapting to the use of the technology. At 2 and 3 years old, they're even better able to manage it than they are, which is something Celeste spoke about. So there is a sense in which I think parents feel as though they can sometimes be left behind by their own children, where they may feel as though they're not prepared to be able to teach these. So I'm going to come back to you, Carrie Ann, as you spoke last. How do we get parents to be comfortable with understanding that there is a role for them to play, and they must play, otherwise we're going to have a problem?
Well, I think like with anything, there's good and bad to technology, and it must be, we must pay attention to both, right? How can technology be used for good, and how can technology be used for bad? And so we're talking about things like what constitutes responsible use, as well as the correct use of the various technology, the platforms that we're going to be interfacing with. So in particular, again, just thinking of COVID, I think COVID-19 has given us the perfect exhibit A to use for such a conversation like this. where many parents found themselves having to transition to an online school platform, the Google Classroom platform, so their children can continue their education. Realizing now that that therefore means that they are being placed in potentially vulnerable positions where they may have access to content that ultimately we wouldn't want them to have access to. And oftentimes it was because to that the children were using the parents' technology. So maybe the parents' cell phone or a tablet, right? Which would not have maybe the same type of restrictions you would put on if it was the child's personal one. And I think even
there
in
were
that,
some
there was some,
cases where it was deliberately done by, I think, children in classes where they just shared screens and that sort of thing. The teachers
right,
trying to
right. So rightfully so, you can understand why parents will become concerned that, especially if they already are feeling a bit intimidated by the technology, by the use of these devices. They may, yes, have a smartphone, but they don't really use it to its full, extent, like
it's a
the
phone
full
with a
scope of
screen.
what this, yeah. And I might just use WhatsApp. I just call. I may go on Facebook. I know a lot of older persons that they don't have Instagram, they don't have TikTok, they don't have Snapchat, which are platforms that younger people are on. So you
Are
may
you
not be
calling me an
aware
older
of,
person?
well, if the shoe fits, I'm just saying. But I'm just highlighting these things because when you start to understand the scope of, or the amount of apps and the different spaces that exist on the internet that persons can be a part of, then parents and adults naturally get worried and scared, which is understandable. And so I think one way that parents can help to be a bit more comfortable is making themselves familiar with what these platforms are, how they work, what happens on them. They themselves need to spend time learning how to use their gadgets, whether that would be the tablet or the phone or the computer, right? Invest in their own knowledge and their own capacity building in utilizing these devices, because as long as you feel competent enough to use it, it automatically helps you to feel a lot more comfortable, so that if something should go awry, you know how to step in and bring a end to that. You know how to make sure that you set certain permissions on the devices that your children are using, so as to not allow them to be able to access content that you don't want them to have access to, that kind of thing. So I would suggest to parents to just familiarize yourself with the technology that is there, and ask questions. If you yourself don't know what to do, look for persons and even their organizations. Like I could call, I know for sure, Echo Nation. They do work around social media protection. What do you call it? What's the term? I forget the actual term for it now. But like ensuring that young people are staying safe while they're online. And even now during COVID, they've had a series of webinars, I guess, or just like sessions where they've been talking about these type of things. So you have resources that you can tap into to get support to help you build the skill and the knowledge that you need to be able to feel more comfortable with having your children and your young people utilize these devices and technology.
I can definitely say, to add on to that, Google is your friend, YouTube is your friend. Get on and learn. It literally is that simple. But Carrie Ann approached it from the understanding of the technology itself and looking at the apps and seeing what the spaces are that children can get into. I'm going to ask you, Celeste, what about being able to set things up ahead of time? You talked about soft skills. Let's go back to some of the things which are timeless that we should be training these children into to be able to help them, even if we have a knowledge and an understanding of the technology, what can we be putting into our children and setting them up to be able to discern for themselves where they should and should not be, and how it can harm them?
Well, as it relates to the technology, I just want to comment on something Carrie Ann said, and it relates to how comfortable you are using the technology. And COVID-19, I think, brought out, very clearly how some of us are intimidated by the technology. For instance, the banks were closed. You now had to go online to pay various bills. That was a major challenge for many people. Sometimes I think we take it for granted that everybody has the same capacity to do certain things, and I know that that is not so, especially with my cohort of parents and children. Some of them have difficulties trying to, maneuver with this technology. And what I would say, Graham, is that it shows us that you have to inculcate in our children the practice of learning consistently. You have to learn, learning must be a lifelong process. You have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to retool yourself, because—
Sorry to cross you, Celeste. Is this something, because I really want us to pat as much as possible into this, is this something that should be demonstrated perhaps? Are we calling parents to deliberately get ahead of their children to make sure they stay ahead of the curve? I mean, you talked about the people who were born in a certain age. I came up where the first computer I had, and my father was big in computers and in responsible for bringing the internet to Barbados and all sorts of things. And the first computer I had was this giant thing. Yeah. And he sat me down immediately from the time we got the internet and said, there are places you should know not to go.
Yes.
Okay. Is that something we need to say, parents, here's the ball, you need to run with it?
Yes, Graham, and they can only do so if they know how to do so. So that's what brings me to the point that parents need to stay ahead of their kids by being au fait with the technology. As Carrie Ann said, it can be used for good, and we know it can be used for bad. We see that daily, but parents need to be abreast with the technology so that they know what to do. There are parents whose children know far more about the internet than they do, and as a result, you find that they're doing something which is not right, and parents have to find it from other parents. All right, because you do not possess the basic skills to go on a laptop or a telephone and check even the history. So it means that if we are gonna be in a position to guide our children and put them in the, guide them along the right path when it comes to the use of technology, we ourselves must be au fait. And I would be honest, I would be a parent at falling to that category, because I am not as comfortable with the technology as I should be. But bearing in mind that it is really the way forward, I would advise all parents, as Carrie Ann said, if you don't know, ask someone who knows. You said Google is your friend. Google it. Just find the information, and then when you yourself have the information, then you're able to share it with your children, and you're able then to put checks and balances really in place so that they will not be misusing the technology.
Straight to David. Those checks and balances she just mentioned, can you give us some practical ideas of the kind of boundaries we should be setting up as far as technology use is concerned to assist our kids? Let's not fool ourselves. This is not about control. Kids find ways around things all the time. They're able to explore and find a back door that you didn't know about. So let us talk seriously about where should we draw lines in the sand for our children. What practical ways, keeping a master password on the device for yourself, what are some of the practical things that we can do as far as, especially as devices become smaller and more portable? They're going with the children now. It's not like when I first started where a computer was at home and it was this huge bulky thing. They're not even using laptops now. It's a tablet and they're going with it.
Or cell phone. When it comes to the actual technological things you could do, you'll be more au fait with that, the master passwords and stuff. But what I would say though is that there's nothing wrong with having continuous conversations with your children, and start from young, because then it creates the foundation for the communication that you would want to have with them to be more accepted by them. So let me just give a simple example. With this whole COVID thing, this whole thing with masks and that sort of thing, okay? We had my great niece, she's about 6 or 7 years old. So she went upstairs to her grandparents and, well, great grandparents. And when she got on the step, she saw some strangers, some strangers in the patio. Everyone was spaced out, more than 6 feet. But she just turned, and my dad said made a beeline back down to her grandmother and her mother's apartment. And her explanation for that was she went up there, she saw there were strange people with no masks, and she ran back down to her place, her mother's place. Okay? Now, she wouldn't have thought through the fact that everyone was sitting more than 6 feet apart and that sort of thing. They were outside in the patio. But because conversations would be had with her at the start of COVID about the importance of wearing a mask, what can happen if you don't wear the mask, then she just instinctively knew what to avoid. Similarly, I think that if you can communicate with your children, not just laying the sand about what not to watch, what sites not to go on, but explain to them the reasons why, the dangers of opening their minds to certain types of information, whether it be pornography, that sort of thing. I think it would make it easier for you to trust that they would follow through on avoiding those sites. It will not always work, but I think that's the best bet that you have. I think another thing too, going back to what Carrie Ann had said earlier, and Carrie Ann provided a lot of thought, because I see that Celeste also tapped into some of what she said. In trying to understand about using the technology and that sort of thing, involve your children. Use that as a bonding moment, a parent-child bonding moment of checking in. Well, could you show me how to set up my Instagram? Could you show me how to do this? Because then the child, and you know how big I am on the whole thing with empathy and building empathic skills, Graham. It allows the child to connect with you on that level as far as the technology is concerned. And again, I think that allows for an easier conduit for them to, when they hear their friends saying, look, I'm going to check this site, and they check the site, see what it is, they'll talk and say, look, I don't think daddy can like me watching this or looking at this. And so I'm all for building that relationship so that a lot of the draconian things don't necessarily need to happen, because you've instilled in them not just the nature of the relationship between yourself and them, but instilled in them the reasons why there are the do's and don'ts.
Oh, that's definitely on there. I listened to this, and I when you talked about going through things with the children, there was a pastor that jumped me when he confessed that he doesn't turn off the set scenes in the movies or anything when his children, he doesn't jump up and turn them off. He lets them watch them and then sits down and says, okay, what do you think God felt about that? Do you think that was honoring and such, and made it a discussion point. I am talking to you. This is what is happening. Let's jam about it.
And it takes away the intrigue, because a lot of time, especially for teenagers, the intrigue is what draws them in.
I think that is
Secrecy.
absolutely correct.
The
You were
secrecy of
saying,
watching
Carrie Ann?
it. No, I was adding to what David said, and in addition to the intrigue, is also that secrecy of, you know, watching it and no one knows, and you know.
They said that there's a saying, and I heard my niece with it, that strict parents make sneaky children. Yeah. So, I mean, there must be a balance. We must be able to strike a balance. And I agree with that, Pastor, because you can, you know, use it as a teachable moment. Children are curious by nature. And if they believe that you are hiding something from them, they will use other methods to find out that information. So I believe it best that you, as a parent, you have that frank discussion with the child. It must be age appropriate, however. It must be
Of
age
course.
appropriate.
Of course.
But I believe that as a parent, it is your place to discuss those things with children, because if you leave it up to their friends, they may get the wrong information. So I believe that we must raise our children and we must teach them a bit of everything. Because if we don't, we leave it to the outsiders to teach them.
It's not only even the movies, just watching the ads that show on television have so much content that can generate conversation that you can have with your children about the values or the lack thereof that you are seeing displayed. And so I also wanted to say that I really appreciate and agree what David said as well about the opportunities for bonding and relationship building that can occur when parents, and I think off air we were talking about humility, and that actually came back to me when David was talking about how as parents, as adults, you have to humble yourself to remember you don't know everything. There are things that are going to be outside of your scope and that your child or your children may actually know more about, and that's not a bad thing. So therefore, having them work with you to show you how to use the various technology devices, etc., can actually be really great bonding moments. It is actually cultivating other soft skills like David mentioned before. Empathy, which is a skill that people need to have across the board, right? It helps them to understand the importance of teamwork and patience and all of these soft skills that they may not even realize they are learning and developing in those moments, but they actually are. And then they are able to draw on that in other aspects of their lives when they have to then employ these skills in other settings and in other spaces. So it's all connected, you know? And I think that that's actually a really great opportunity to continue to support the development of our young people. And also we as adults, we are developing and still growing as well.
I can testify that it definitely was a very strong developmental process, teaching my mother to use email. We bonded.
Patience.
We had a long period of great bonding over, which is about space key and the
That's how I feel about teaching my mom to use Instagram right now. It's a journey in patience, but she'll get there.
It is quite 8-hour flight. I think that we are kind of right smack dab in the middle of where we need to be as far as developing the rapport that then is able to allow us to sneak the skills in, because we know what's happening. They may not understand what's happening, but as parents, sometimes it takes us being deliberate to say, I'm going to set this up, or see an opportunity and say, I'm going to use this to go in this direction. We talked about getting assistance with technology and trying to figure out what technology is out there. You've got two social workers with a lot of history and a lot of experience. Could you talk to the parents that need assistance with the other side of things, the soft skills, being able to, where are the places that they can go to find like-minded individuals who can help them to develop consistent, deliberate plans, deliberate patterns to develop their children with these soft skills, with please and thank you, with saying good morning, with just simple things of etiquette that they may feel, I don't know these things. Where can they go for help with that? Carry on.
Well, as you mentioned, when you give that brief introduction of me, I am actually an etiquette consultant, and a lot of the work that I do is around cultivating life skills in young people in particular. So my organization, Gems in the Rough, we would be more than happy to facilitate sessions that speak to helping young people identify and build these skills, see them as important skills that will serve them well throughout their entire lifetime. I also think that parents themselves also need to remember that these are skills that they also need to be practicing. So it's one thing to want to have your children be well-rounded and they're able to, hold themselves well in a room of people. They can communicate well. They can, basically not embarrass you. But then you are also not up to scratch. That doesn't work. So parents themselves also need to be thinking about developing their own skill sets. And I know there are a lot of companies that do a lot of this type of developmental work with their staff. But in the same light, the information that we would share with young people isn't necessarily going to vary or change much for adults, if you understand what I'm saying. Because it's foundational. It's the fundamentals of navigating life in an appropriate way. Understanding what are good manners, how to even using technology. So what are these social media etiquette protocols you need to think about when you are going out into a room with people, the importance of like keeping your phone on silent. Like these are even at church. I don't even have to say a room of people, like at church. We know there's that one person that every Sunday it is guaranteed their phone gonna ring. And it's like, really? You know what I'm saying? So like those very basic things, definitely they can connect with us at Gems in the Rough, and we can support that type of knowledge building and skill building for young people and for adults as well.
That's fantastic. And I have no problem with asking you, can you give a number that they can contact the organization at? Or email address? Right now,
I can give an email address. It's gitr.barbados@gmail.com. So that's GITR, that stands for Gems in the Rough, .barbados@gmail.com. And you can also find us on Instagram at GITR Barbados and Facebook as well at GITR Barbados.
All right. One of the concerns, I think, as we look at the life skills that are required, is something that I've had come up in several discussions, the fact that Jesus did say that men would become lovers of themselves, rude to parents and dismissive and that sort of thing, disrespectful. And that's what we're directly trying to agitate against here. Let's talk about the social life skills, the 21st century social life skills. Carrie Ann just mentioned social media etiquette. And it is a truth that as much as social media is policed by the owners of whatever platform it is, whether Twitter, because we see even now with this situation in the world, people calling out Twitter and Facebook and such like to say, you need to do something about some of the messages that are being put out. You can't just let them stay, because obviously these people are inciting unrest, inciting issues and that sort of thing. How do we, I'm going to come back to David, how do we make sure that we, what are the warning signs? What are the things that we should be looking at? How do our literal in-person skills translate to social media skills to be able to say, well, look, you know, the same way you say thank you here, you say thank you there, and that sort of thing.
When you say warning signs, you're speaking about warning signs for us, for ourselves, or for parents?
In general, I think
general?
because this comes back to what Carrie Ann was saying about the skills being for both the youth and the parents.
Right.
This is something that is an environment that we are all in, and we
Right.
all have to learn to navigate. So what are some of the things that perhaps you have observed, or in fact, let me throw it out to all of you. What are some of the things that you've observed that have occurred in social media that you think this needs to be addressed in a way that can minimize it if we only do certain things?
Well, what I see a lot, especially dealing with children at school, and a lot of social media stuff that creates conflictual issues in schools. I see it as a result of persons not honing in because they probably never knew, or they probably ignore what they would have been taught from young. Honing on fundamentals, like Carrie Ann said. I think that the social media age and all that sort of stuff, and the social media as a medium, I don't think it requires any more understanding of what we normally should have within ourselves as human beings, dealing with other human for others, thinking of others before yourself, compassion for others. I think that if those fundamentals are instilled in a person, whether child or adult, then there should not be issues like what we see social media, shaming others, harassing others.
Cyberbullying.
Yes, cyberbullying. I think that if those fundamentals are instilled in a person's mind and a person's psyche and a person's way of thinking, generally in normal physical world, that they would translate into the online world. I think a lot of what happens though is because of we were mentioned in another panel discussion, pace of life, having the time to sit down with your children to talk through things. The children not being connected with the extended family as they would have before for the older generation to instill some of those things. The whole thing with the bombardment of different worldviews as far as socialization and how our youngsters should think through the Instagram, through the other social media platforms. Because we are taken away as adults from being able to instill as much as we could have before, and then there is the bombardment from the social media that they're constantly exposed to, then we have to be very conscious of the fact that they are going to be living out their lives and living out how they act on social media based on external forces and external influences that have nothing to do with us. So we have to find ways to be able to counter that by reinforcing what I believe would have been instilled in the children in the first place, as we would raise them to be proper men and proper women in society.
Celeste, have you seen anything that you think requires that kind of attention?
Yes, it goes back to your values, the values that were instilled in you as a young person, because I believe that what we see on social media and what you do in real life, they're one and the same. I think if that is your value system, then it will be portrayed on the social media. And what I find is that a lot of people tend to live their lives on social media. There seems to be no privacy anymore. And then it comes back to haunt them. I've heard of stories where, when people put stuff on social media, then they go to apply for a job and your boss sees it. All right? So I think our young people, they have to be counseled how those actions can come back to haunt them. And they need to make really informed decisions before putting anything on social media. because inevitably it comes back to haunt them. But I don't believe that, you put one set of stuff on social media and then you live your life, a certain way. I believe that they're one and the same. And what we see on social media is basically what you get in real life. But I think that systems need to be put in place. Children need to be, I don't want to say police, but you need to find a mechanism where you can better monitor. Because I'm seeing, I think there was a time the age to go on social media used to be about 14, but I'm seeing younger and younger children on the social media, and sometimes the stuff that they're getting up to, you wonder who is monitoring these children, and you wonder, they're at home, well, in houses. I don't know if they're at home, but they're in houses, and I know they can't be alone. So it means that we need to put measures in place where parents have a better system of monitoring what is happening with the children on social media.
So as far as that thing, I've heard an adage coming up more often now, that what gets on the internet, it's on the internet forever. So you recommend that.
It only needs to happen, and people will go, they type your name in and it pops back up again. And people, they need to recognize that once it is in cyberspace, it is forever out there. So you need to make informed decisions before putting anything on the social media.
So really and truly, I should not bother with the twerk videos. I was gonna.
No, I wouldn't advise that.
No, I don't think you should.
Okay. All right.
If I could pick up from.
Sorry,
if I
just
could
let me
pick
speak
up.
quickly.
Mhm.
Sorry, I was just thinking that it goes back to, if it is, again, that if you have that basic instilled value of respect for self, then there's some things you just would not put out there. Go ahead, Carrie.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Well, but then there's also peer pressure. So, it's not black and white. And we're talking about
I've
young
been
people
pressured
who
considerably to put those twerk videos out there. I'm
okay,
just saying.
so we're gonna give you positive peer pressure and plead for you not to do that. Please don't put those out. So I mean, there are some young people who they want to fit in. It seems like it's trendy to have certain types of content on your Instagram page or on your Facebook or on your TikTok, your TikTok videos. And I mean, I'm even seeing it with adults. I'm seeing some adults. TikTok is the biggest rage right now. And I'm seeing some adults, some Christians, some gospel artists, and I'm like, I don't feel you should really be doing this particular TikTok. Like, I don't think this is kind of aligning with the value system that you should be displaying.
Sorry to
But
cross
it's what's trendy.
Sorry to cross you, Carrie, but I think that, again, this comes back to understanding the spaces that are available and what those spaces are for. And I think you need to explain a little bit about TikTok, because TikTok, one of the things that happens is that when people put up videos, it becomes a challenge to other people to do this particular thing. As I've seen and heard of injuries, I've seen and heard of embarrassing situations, all kinds of things, because people are doing the same thing they see other people doing.
Yeah, so you're kind of becoming a trendsetter, influencer, and that's what a lot of the social media is about, trying to kind of position you to be this role model that you may not even want to be. And you have to be very careful with kind of stepping into that role. But I think what is really critical is understanding everything that both David and Celeste said and how that ties into the importance of consequential thinking. Like the if-then scenario. So I want to be part of the in crowd, I want to seem like I am active on social media and not like I'm boring or whatever. So if I put out this twerking video, then what is the potential fallout, Graham, right? What could possibly happen? That could be either positive or negative. So we're not only saying that every single thing you do will have a negative impact, but the point is you have to have, right. So again, the soft skill of being able to critically think it through and make an informed decision, as Celeste said, about whether this is a good idea. Should I do this or should I not do this? Nowadays, again, supporting what Celeste said just now, employers are doing background checks by checking your social media as well. So it's not simply, do you have a police certificate of character? That's not the extent to it. And even for me, I run a Young Mothers program. I work with a lot of young people. And in particular for our Young Mothers program, when we are doing our interviews and assessments of the girls who are seeking to be participants in the program, we actually do background checks. So we check their social media. We go and check and see who's this person, what are the kind of things they're into, what are they posting online. If I have any counselors or persons who are trying to support the program, anyone that wants to do anything with the program, I want to see what you're about. Because yes, Celeste is right. What you're posting online is not separate to who you really are. And in most instances, Instagram and these type of platforms are really more like highlight reels. We usually only post the most exciting, the most intriguing type of content on these pages, right? Things that will elicit emotional response because we want the likes, we want the follow, we want that kind of stuff. So it gives us a good snapshot into the personality. What is this person about? What are they doing? And I think with young people, they don't think about the impact that utilizing these platforms in a negative way can have on their future. So yeah, you go and you post that nude picture or that twerking video where, you know, half of your behind is falling out of your shorts. And then that's out there forever. And you're going to apply for a job and they Google you to find out about your social media and they find that. They say, oh no, this is not the type of person we want working for us. And you might even be applying for a job that requires you to be the face of the company. I don't want that when people hear your name and Google you, that's what they're seeing from my company. And yeah, we may think that's discriminatory, but this is the real world we're living in, right? So I think it's really important that we highlight that the two are not separate, and having strong values, having a strong sense of who you are and what you stand for is helpful in helping you make these good decisions.
And I fully agree with what you said, Carrie Ann, about the consequential thinking, because that's something I push a lot with the students at school. Because in their age range, I mean, at this stage of development, they're not going to be thinking about that, which is why it is. Sometimes when you allow them to see what has happened to other people who have gone that path, and years later, the regrets they had, a lot of times, well, I should say me, as an older person, I think to myself, how could you not see that? But a lot of them at that stage of development, they do not see that connection in terms of the consequences.
Hindsight is 2020, sir.
Yeah.
We have it because we've passed it. They don't. They're looking forward, and they don't have a clue what that looks like yet. I want us. We're coming down to the end, and I want all three of you on this particular point. We've been talking a lot about technology and how to use and soft skills and teaching discernment and teaching discipline when they use them. Is there value to teaching to disconnect? Is there value to teaching? There's a time to put it down. There's a life that you must cultivate outside of online.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that is part of the important balance that needs to be struck when we are helping them to understand how technology should fit into their lives, how it can be used in a meaningful way, and how it shouldn't be used as a prop. I have significant challenges with a lot of young people who are unable to put down their phones. They can't sit and be in a space without having their phone in their hand. They don't want to be alone with their own thoughts because they haven't allowed themselves to even be comfortable just being alone, you know, without anything. That's so uncomfortable for them. And sometimes I force them to do it. And I mean, they're switching, they can't sit still, you know, it's like it becomes an addiction. And so having boundaries is really important. understanding that these are things that are supposed to enhance our life, but they're not supposed to become our entire life. Understanding that you still need to know how to communicate with people face to face. You still need to, because another thing that I'm finding that's happening, people are a lot more comfortable texting, sending messages via WhatsApp. A lot of people don't even want to talk on the phone anymore. Far less have a face-to-face conversation.
Yeah.
Oh no, right? Because there's such discomfort around that, because we've gotten so accustomed to leaning so heavily on our devices and hiding behind them. And so as parents, as adults, we have to take them away sometimes. We have to set boundaries sometimes. We have to make sure we have no technology zones in the house. So if you're a family that sees the value in having dinner together every night at the table, no phones. This is the time where we talk, we communicate. I get to learn about your day, what's happening with you, what's going on. You learn about me. We spend quality time without the distractions, because that's the thing that's happening. We're together physically in spaces, but we're not really together because everybody's on their own devices doing their own things in their own spaces still.
If I may very quickly, one of the things I want to add right there to that specific no technology zone of dinner time is the problem that I have seen of parents expecting that the children are going to fill this space with what has happened to them. The children need to know that you had a day.
Yeah.
They need to hear that mommy and daddy lived. You know, I was at work, and it may bore them. They may not understand any of it, but they need to understand these are things that are critical to a person in a working position. They're critical to a person in a position that is trying to manage a household. I had to pay a bill. I had to go and stand up
in a long
line, you know, although that is now probably disappeared because you go on your phone and you send the money. But even that, you know, I went and logged on and I see some missing charges and I can't figure out, and I had to have a long conversation with the bank, and I let them know.
You don't necessarily want to, you still want to maintain, it still needs to be age appropriate. So they don't need to know every single thing.
Yeah, but
at
they
the
need
same
to
time,
know
your
that
point
you
is valid, because it also doesn't make it feel like this is a time where, as the adult, you're just interrogating them about their life and it's one-sided.
That's the point.
You know, so they can also then feel like, well, it's good for me to know about what mommy and daddy have been dealing with. Like, they actually want me to know. They actually want me to understand, as opposed to, like, you know, be a child and stay in your corner type vibe, which a lot of children, I think, feel that the conversations and the communication they have with adults is usually, it feels very one-sided. Like, I'm just here to tell you what to do. I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. You have to answer them, but you can't ask me nothing. So I think that can help cultivate a soft skill of what good communication is. You know, it can help cultivate the soft skill of problem solving. You may have a problem that you say, hey, how y'all would deal with this? And you might be surprised that your child might actually come up with the answer to help you figure out how to navigate paying that bill and not having to go and start up in that line anymore.
Bang on. Celeste.
Yeah. I know we're addressing the youth, but I heard Carrie Ann said just now, parents may need to take away the phones. But my question is, who is going to take away the phones from the parents? I attended a party.
Touche.
You are hitting all the right spots.
Yeah.
Last year. And the party I would attend would have 50 and up. And almost all of the people who were in attendance were heads down on their cell phones. It is like we no longer know how to have a conversation. I know of situations where families are in the same home and they're texting one another from their rooms. So we have to lead by example. And we have couples who go to bed. You are on your side on your telephone. I'm on my side with my telephone. So I agree that we do have to come to the realization that while the technology is useful, It should not be allowed to take over our lives. And we have to set the examples for our children. Yes, I know we're addressing youth, but it is something I see quite a bit in mature individuals as well. And I agree that we should have times where telephones, tablets, you know, they have no place there. Dinner, breakfast, and just have quiet family time where you get to find out, as Graham said, how was your day? How are you coping in school? You know, what are your plans for the rest of the week even? I find that we have really lost the art of communicating because of the same technology which is supposed to enhance our relationships. It is now really ruining a lot of our relationships.
David, very quickly.
Yes. Okay. What I would say is that I fully agree with what Celeste and Carrie Ann would have mentioned. Our actions need to be purposeful. It's not good enough to just say, well, you only have 2 hours with the laptop, cell phone, whatever, and go find something else to do. So purposeful could be exhibited, personal action could be exhibited in what you said, Graham, having those conversations. And having those conversations, talking about your day as a parent, could help with some of those things you mentioned, could help take away from the sense of entitlement that so many of our youth have, thinking that money comes from trees and that sort of thing. Well, not literally, but you know, they
So
don't really
true.
value things that are provided to them by their parents. And those conversations could pick up on that. And going back to what Carrie Ann has said about addiction, I fully agree that what's happening with the technology is an addiction. If you look at it, this generation of children, and probably generation before, up to the early 2000s, the child is born, the easiest way to keep them quiet, put them in front of a tablet. So from that age, they pick that up, and their brains are developing, so it's going to be an addiction. So to counter that, you have to be purposeful with your youngsters. Put them in activities if possible, if it's affordable, and get them to doing things where, like both Celeste and Carrie Ann have said, where they interact. If you're in football or cricket or volleyball or netball or whatever, you have to interact, and there be group cohesion, understanding, teamwork, all of those things. So that's my take.
We're out of time, but I just want to say very quickly, thank you so very much, guys. Man, I really wish we could go on. A couple things I would love to add. What David said just now, cultivate a non-technology hobby, okay? Parents, cultivate a non-technology hobby. You garden, you do something or the other, which does not involve technology at all, and you get your children involved in it from young. You'd be amazed to see how they're going to go with that. Even when they've got the opportunity for the technology, they might defer to say, look, I'm going to go outside in the garden, I'm going to do something else. The last suggestion, and I think Celeste hinted on it, and I want to drill down on it, is that I believe personally that the bedroom needs to become a no technology zone. If you are married and you care about your marriage, I think that one of the things that would help a lot of marriages would be if you say, stay out in the living room as long as you like, okay, till 10, whatever, but don't bring it in here. When you come in here, this is a place where the two of us are just gonna talk, or the children are gonna come in, we're gonna cuddle, play with them, we're gonna do something that does not involve screens, that does not involve any distraction from you. You are my focus in this space. And that's what communication is really about. Thank you so very much for joining us on this panel discussion, the 21st Century Life Skills for Youth, and it became for our parents as well. If you have been blessed, please stay tuned and make sure and look out for other Family Fest videos like this one, and have a wonderful day.
We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness. With God on our side, we're marching strong, looking out for hurting children all around, and help happiness.